Having been leading 2-0, it's impossible to package this up as anything other than 2 vital points dropped. Mixed feelings, though, this morning because there was plenty of good on show, but our shortcomings were evident too. We'll break down Arsenal 2, Aston Villa 2 in full on this episode of the Chronicles of a Gooner podcast. But first, a quick message from our partner. This video is brought to you by Stocks FC. Stocks FC is the football stock market where you can buy stocks in your favourite players and earn cash rewards based on their real-life performances. To get you started, they're giving away 5 free stocks to every user that signs up this month, offering you the chance to familiarise yourself with the platform. Buy stocks in young players you fancy to prove themselves and watch their stocks rise, or invest in those you see as solid performers who will maintain their value. Earn weekly dividend payments every time your players score goals, make assists and play key passes. Your free loan stocks are eligible for payouts for a month, so why not give it a go? To claim your 5 free loan stocks and begin your journey, scan the QR code on the screen or click the link in the description. I'll be taking you along on my journey throughout our upcoming videos. Join me on the ride, Stocks FC. Morning, Gooners. Welcome back to the Chronicles of a Gooner podcast with me, your host, Harry Symeou. Hope you're all having a wonderful Sunday so far. To our live viewers, apologies. This is the second attempt to bring you the live stream because the tech gremlins got to us bright and early in the morning, which wasn't ideal. But anyway, we're back now and we've got a lot, as always, to discuss. Coming into this one off the back of a disappointing evening at Emirates Stadium. There's no way of sort of dressing this up and trying to make it look prettier than what it actually was. This was an Arsenal side that had really given their all in midweek to get through the North London derby and take all 3 points from it, who had succeeded in taking 2 points out of Liverpool's lead, but then 3 days later, or whatever it was, hand those 2 points back to Liverpool and put us essentially back to square one, which is why there's a lot of frustration. It's why there's a lot of disappointment. It's why so many feel as though they've had the kind of stuffing knocked out of them. I certainly feel that way. But it's strange, isn't it, with the Arsenal, because there's some games that I come away from and I'm like angry and sort of bitterly disappointed with maybe how we performed or certain moments in the game. We've had times where we've been bitterly disappointed and frustrated with refereeing decisions, etc., etc. I don't feel like that today. I feel different. I feel sad because I look at that squad and I just think, guys, it is on its knees. It is on its knees. And we'll come on to expand and elaborate on that point a little bit later on in the podcast, because I think we do need to talk about the bigger picture. And I do think the bigger picture is ultimately why you saw what you saw yesterday. I think the bigger picture is why there have been a few setbacks this season. And yeah, we're struggling to cope with them, as I think a lot of teams would. And that's the key bit. A lot of teams would. If you took Mo Salah out of Liverpool, the way we've lost Bukayo Saka, if you took Virgil van Dijk out of their defence yesterday away at Brentford, the way that William Saliba was out of our defence, and I'm not saying injuries, should be used as an excuse and that you should only look at the injuries. No, you look at what you can control. You look at all the other things and you look at what you can impact and all the rest of it. But at the end of the day, to ignore them, to pretend that they're not there, is wild for me. And I understand why rival fans do that. I understand why rival fans go, Arsenal, I don't care. They're a mouthy bunch over there. Who cares if they lose a couple of key players? Good. I understand why rival fans say that stuff and look at it that way. What I don't understand is why our fans want to completely overlook the fact that, as I said already, this squad is on its knees. If I could quickly ask before we continue into the bulk of today's show, if you haven't done so already, leave us a like, subscribe to the channel if you're with us on YouTube. If you're watching us live on X right now, be sure to come over to the Chronicles of a Gooner YouTube channel, or you can subscribe to us on your favorite podcast platform as well. There is lots and lots of content coming your way. We're pretty much daily at the moment. We brought you a match day reaction piece over on the Patreon side of things yesterday as well. So if you want some instant reaction straight after the full-time whistles, you can, of course, head over to our Patreon page. The link is in the description below. Do check it out. Okay. As I said, overall feeling, frustration, disappointment. The fact that we've given Liverpool those 2 points back is really, really hard to take for me, because we didn't even have time to kind of get excited again and believe that, we could make up the gap further. On Wednesday night, I came away from the game thinking we've taken 2 points out of that lead. If we can take another 2 out by sort of mid-February, I tell you what, this is on. This is on. And we're hoping that we can progress in the Champions League without having to play in that playoff round, which should, in theory, give Arsenal a little bit of time off to be able to rest and recover, obviously because of our FA Cup exit as well. And maybe that could be our Dubai. Maybe that could be our sort of sparking point like we experienced last season, after which Arsenal went on this incredible run. Let's get into the starting 11 to start with. Mikel Arteta didn't really have that much in terms of choices, if we're being completely honest about it. I know that his sort of critics really do enjoy sticking the boot in and really would like to question this lineup and say that he got it all wrong, etc., etc. But what was the guy to do given what he had available to him yesterday? So he went with Raya in goal. Partey, Timber, Gabriel, and Lewis Skelly with a back four. Odegaard, Rice, and Marino with a midfield trio. And then it was Martinelli, Havertz, and Trossard in attack. Look, Trossard, I thought was really good in the North London derby. Really good. And I thought, although he didn't complete the game, he looked back to his best. And, I was keen for him to start in this game. I was keen to see Gabriel Martinelli come back into the side as well. Because I think look, he's played a lot of football recently, but I think Martinelli is doing all right at the moment. When you look into the sort of crowd of players that we have at our disposal at the moment, when you think about who's performing, who's not, I'm not saying Martinelli's been perfect, but he's certainly one of our better players at the moment. He's direct, he drives. I quite like Martinelli from the right-hand side. I've said that many times before, and I thought that was evident again, that he can be really, really effective there. When we turned up at Emirates Stadium yesterday, Raheem Sterling had to come out of the team for me. He had to come out of the team. I thought he was, with the exception of 10 minutes at the start of the game against Spurs, I thought he was largely ineffective. And I don't think he warranted a place in the starting 11 again. So I was fine with that decision. The one that people are going to question, the one that people are going to focus on, particularly because of the nature of the goals that we conceded, was Thomas Partey at right back. And look, it's been done before. I think he's had some good games individually there before. I always think back to the Liverpool game where I was really worried about him playing at right back, and I thought he had a really good game that day. But I agree it's not ideal. And I also agree that it takes something away from our midfield when he plays there. So could Mikel Arteta have done something differently there? I think Tom Canton asked him the question in the press conference yesterday. He said, look, I think that's 5 out of 6 or something, or without a win when Partey has played at right back. And Mikel Arteta was very, very sort of quick to shut that down. He didn't want to be drawn into criticizing an individual player. And I think Arteta handled that right. We were talking in a WhatsApp group, and a friend of mine said, I can't believe he gave that response. It sort of didn't really give too much away, or that it was a sort of weak, suggested that it was a kind of weak response. And my argument back was, well, what do you want him to do? He's picked Thomas Partey at right back. It hasn't worked. Not yesterday or on previous occasions. If you look at the results and you look at it that sort of kind of high level, for the manager to then come out and throw the player under the bus would be pretty bad, given that he's the one that keeps playing in there. I'm sure Thomas Partey doesn't want to play at right back. I'm sure Thomas Partey would much prefer to sit in the midfield where he's more comfortable and where he probably feels that he can do his best work. So, to sort of expect Arteta to throw him under the bus when it's clearly Arteta's decision to play him there, I don't think that's the way to kind of look at this. Timber tucked in at centre-back. I thought Timber played all right, to be fair. I know he's a centre-back by trade. He's been a centre-back most of his career. It's no surprise to see him sort of slot into that role quite comfortably. But then you come onto the substitutes bench, and I think this is a really, really important point and an important discussion that we need to have around this game, right? So I'll read out the bench to our listeners. Butler, Oyedeji, Jorginho, Kabia, Kakuri, Kivior, Neto, Sterling, Tierney, Zinchenko. You've got one attacking option of note on that substitutes bench. And that one attacking option of note is an option of note because of his history, not necessarily because of what he's done since he's arrived at Arsenal Football Club. Raheem Sterling is not working. It's just not working. And, you know, I do have sympathy for a manager who wants to change things in game, wants to freshen things up, but can't do so because his options are limited. And I remember having a very, very similar conversation last season at a time when we were struggling and saying, Arteta probably turned around and looked at his bench and just thought, I don't have anyone that I look at and feel can make a meaningful impact on this game. Now, people will talk about squad building, and I get that, and I understand that. You know, it's a totally valid and fair point to make. But you can't ignore the injuries. You just can't ignore the injuries. And that's why I keep saying the squad is on its knees. If everybody was fit in an ideal world scenario, right, you'd have Jesus on the bench. You'd have Sterling on the bench. You'd have Saka playing, so you'd have one of Martinelli or Trossard on the bench as well. And all of a sudden, you got 3-4 very viable and very good attacking options. That's the reality of the situation. You know, if Partey can play in midfield because we don't have problems at the back, Ben White obviously out at the moment, Saliba out, meaning that we didn't have two defensive options at our disposal. That's why the likes of Kakuri are in there, etc., etc. You know, all of a sudden your bench looks completely different. Now, I know you can't ever look at football and assume or take for granted that everybody's going to be fit and available. But if you can't see, you know, and I haven't even mentioned Calafiori, by the way, when talking defensive options, if you can't see that injuries have wreaked havoc on this squad, then what are you looking at? Like, what are you looking at? And I understand that people say, well, yeah, but, you know, if you pick our best 11, there's only a couple of players. Like yesterday, if you picked our best 11, right, Saliba would have been in it. Saka would have been in it. And that's probably, if you want to put Calafiori in at left back, you know, you're talking 3 players. So it's not the end of the world. But the fact is we're playing every 2-3 days at the moment. The fact is we're playing these high intensity, high octane games with very, very short intervals in between. And the inability to change it and the inability to shake it up, not just when it comes to your starting 11, but in game as well, is always going to catch up with you. And it's caught up with us now. You know, you could see that we were tired yesterday. And the only change we made was Raheem Sterling on to replace Gabriel Martinelli on 82 minutes. It's the only change we made. Mikel Arteta made the point in his press conference. He didn't have enough to be able to change it. And there lies the crux of the issue. There lies the main problem with what we saw yesterday. A gassing out of a team that have played too many games in quick succession, and simply we do not have the options to rotate and the options to change it. Andrew says his fault. And he says, squad is too small from the start and we signed injury-prone players. The injury-prone players bit, I kind of agree with you, okay? We all knew that Ricardo Calafiori had problems in his career to date, yet we were willing to go and spend that money on him and take that gamble. Okay, fine. But you can't say William Saliba's injury-prone. You can't say Ben White is injury-prone. You can't say Bukayo Saka is injury-prone. You know, and these are all players that we're without right now. So, you know, you can say, oh, well, he's injury prone, and we should have seen this coming. But we've had so many injuries to players that you never saw it coming with, and that we're now having to fight through without. So it's not an excuse, because when you're 2-0 up, as I said right at the top of the show, right, people will say I'm making excuses. I said right at the top of the show, there's no other way of dressing this up. You're 2-0 up at home to Aston Villa. You need to see the game out. You need to see the game out when you're 2-0 up with an hour gone. You have to, right? There's no excuse for that. But the point I'm trying to make here is, guys, is that we have got to this point where we are running on empty, man. And Nobody's saying that you should excuse Arsenal for that. Nobody's saying that you should absolve all blame and take all blame away from the squad building or the manager or the individual players or the club right at the top. Nobody's saying that. But you can't ignore it. Because if you're ignoring it, your analysis is massively flawed, hugely flawed. So, in terms of how the game went, I thought the start was quite. Whoops. In terms of how the game went, is what I should be saying. Um, I thought the start was quite similar to Spurs, um, in that we were really sort of high octane. High octane. I beg your pardon. There was a lot of energy. There was a lot of aggression, and what we did was stop Aston Villa essentially from settling into the game the way that they would have wanted to. And I'm pleased by what I saw in that first 45, especially in terms of the intensity, in terms of the energy levels, and that's the thing that I find quite sort of frustrating is that when we're talking about playing games every 2-3 days, we seem to be able to find these sort of winds of energy, these bursts of energy for a period in the game. And that is obviously at the beginning of the game. But then as the game goes on, it all changes. We're still trying to play with the same mentality, but we're all of a sudden leaving massive gaps and spaces between our midfield, our attack, our defense. I talked about this post the Spurs game as well. I said that I felt like the game was too open. And for a team that has displayed loads and loads of control and has been often criticized for being boring and too defensive minded, to then all of a sudden want to play this gung-ho wild football when they're 2 goals to the good or in front by 1 as they were against Spurs, that doesn't really fit in with the narrative, does it? It doesn't really fit in with what we've seen so far this season, which tells me that it's tiredness, it's tired legs that are then creating those spaces, that are opening those games up. And the problem is, guys, that we just don't have enough to be able to change it. But I thought the performance actually on the balance overall was probably better than the one against Spurs. The problem was yesterday that we faced a much better team and we faced a team with clinical forwards. So if you want to sit there and go on about, Arsenal's lack of clinical forwards and all the rest of it, and, compare it to Aston Villa, who have, of course, Ollie Watkins, and then that luxury of bringing on John Duran, for instance, right? Then fine. I'm not going to sit and argue back against that today because you saw what happens when you've got midfielders that can contribute, that can make runs into the box like Yuri Tielemans can. He's always had a goal in his locker, Yuri Tielemans. And you saw a brilliant finish from Ollie Watkins, one that Kai Havertz probably doesn't score. Okay, so if you want to make the striker point, and if you want to look at Aston Villa and say, why is it that they've got 2 more clinical forwards than us, 2 better centre forward options than us, you can have that today. I'm not going to argue back against that because you got a point, right? But I thought the performance overall, particularly in the first half, was pretty good again. In the second half, we created a few opportunities, but as I say, the game became all a little bit too stretched to me, and it all became a little bit too easy for Aston Villa to win the ball back, start those transitions. And there were a few occasions where I was worried that they were going to cause us more damage, than we'd have liked. Our first goal comes from a brilliant piece of play on the left-hand side from Leandro Trossard, who I thought had a good game against Spurs and I thought was really, really good again yesterday. I know people will point to the chance that he missed late on in the game, but he was offside, so it wouldn't have counted anyway, FYI. But yeah, I thought Leandro Trossard did really, really well to kind of constantly cause Matty Cash problems, the Aston Villa right back. And when he got down that left-hand side, he was able to deliver quality into the penalty area. And he delivered quality on a few occasions into the penalty area. And I think that the best thing about Leandro Trossard is that, we talk about sometimes players getting a little bit predictable when they're playing on their wrong side. So like we've talked about it before with Martinelli, always wants to cut in. It's a little bit obvious. And one of the things that we've then gone on to praise Bukayo Saka for is Bukayo Saka's variation to his game now. The fact that he is quite happy to say, fine, you're not going to let me go on the inside. I'll go on the outside of you. And I back myself to dig out a good cross with my right foot. Well, Leandro Trossard is as two-footed as they come, I would say. That's one of his real strengths. He's got this really good balance and composure when he is tasked with and required to use his left foot. And he digs out another really good ball, flashes it across the box. And Martinelli comes across and gets something on it, diverts it goalwards. It ain't a good finish from Gabriel Martinelli, by the way. He's incredibly fortunate that it goes off of Emi Martinez and into the back of the net. But hey, that was the rub of the green that we needed, okay? And nobody's going to pretend they don't enjoy watching it go off of Martinez's chest, face, and then into the back of the net. And despite his best efforts to claw it out, it still went over the line. Nobody's going to say they didn't enjoy that. Of course we enjoyed that. But yeah, I thought what was really good about that goal and what kind of really stood out to me in that first half was that not only was Leandro Trossard really effective down the left in terms of, getting the ball into the box, providing that service nice and early and accurately as well, and putting a whip on the ball and a sort of a pace on the ball that made it, for the finisher, just get a touch on it, just steer it the right way, and you've kind of done half the job. Was that Martinelli in that first half became a really impactful far post attacker for us. I really do think that. I think that his moves inside were good, incisive. The runs were made at the right times. We know he's got that burst of pace, and as a result, he could get across the defender really, really effectively. So I really liked that goal. It wasn't the most aesthetically pleasing because the finish wasn't great, but it obviously puts Arsenal in front. And it's an example of how A, Trossard appears to have rediscovered some of his best form, and B, how Gabriel Martinelli can work from the right-hand side and can be a really sort of effective far post attacker. If we talk about the second goal, then we'll do that now. Again, who was involved? Kai Havertz. But Leandro Trossard, first and foremost. And that's the kind of theme of yesterday's game. Good service into the box, and you give your forwards a chance. And Kai Havertz, again, a bit like Martinelli, doesn't produce the best finish, uses the pace on the ball, and is just focused on getting it on target. And we're a little bit lucky that it comes off of Martinez and goes into the back of the net. And 2-0 up, with, Liverpool having won earlier in the day and the pressure that was then on us as a result of that, to be 2-0 up against a very, very good and handy Aston Villa side, it was great. I was really, really pleased. And you're looking at it then and you're thinking, okay, we don't necessarily have a lot of options from the bench. Again, I'm looking at the bench at that point from a defensive standpoint, and I'm thinking the only thing I might do is maybe bring Jorginho on in that midfield to give us a little bit more ball control so that we can slow the tempo of the game down. Or maybe I bring on Kieran Tierney like Mikel Arteta did the other night, or, Zinchenko late on in the game. You're not looking at the bench and thinking, well, that's the standout option to kind of, close the door. Maybe you bring on Jakub Kiwior and you push Jurriën Timber back into right back and use Partey in the midfield, or take Partey off. I don't know. There were options from a defensive standpoint, but the problem was, I think, that we never really had the time to react. We never really had the time to establish a new pattern in the game after going 2-0 up. Because 5 minutes after Kai Havertz had the ball in the back of the net, Yuri Tielemans goes down the other end and pulls one back for Villa. And Mikel Merino's got to track the run better. I think there are a number of defensive mistakes in the lead up to that goal. But end of the day, Mikel Merino's got to track Yuri Tielemans better. Now, I don't want to take anything away from Yuri Tielemans because I think that's a really, really good finish from him. Really, really good goal. But then you're thinking, okay, right, we've got to ride this storm. We've got to weather the storm. This is an Arsenal side that defensively generally are quite good. We should be able to see this through. And it was barely 8 minutes before Ollie Watkins was doing what Ollie Watkins does, which is scoring at the clock end. He seems to be inevitable in that sense. And so, yeah, we concede a second goal. And this goal was the one that really, really upset me. Really, really, really frustrated me. What I'm going to do, I'm just, bear with me a second, because I just want to bring it up on my screen as I talk you guys through it, because I want to make sure that I'm covering all bases with this, because this was really, really frustrating. I hated this goal. I was furious with it. The ads are just loading because, of course, I don't have YouTube Premium, so I've got to wait for the ads to load. But yeah, the partey bit, unforgivable, I guess. But also Villa, Villa hit the post as well. Tielemans hit the post. I'm just looking at the goal now, right? So the second goal, the ball is on the right-hand side with Matty Cash, right? He turns back inside and he sort of not quite on the corner of the box, but at that type of angle, right? And he looks up, and Thomas Partey has got Watkins behind him. He has got no idea where Ollie Watkins is. No idea whatsoever. So the delivery comes in, and Partey, because being a fullback doesn't come naturally to him, his first concern is, I need to step out with the back line. I need to make sure that I'm in sync with the rest of the defense, and I need to step out. He steps out, being completely unawares, though, of Ollie Watkins' position. And by the time Thomas Partey realizes, actually, the ball's not going that way, the angle on the cross isn't quite what he anticipated, he turns around and Ollie Watkins is what? 5-6 yards away from him. Kai Havertz rises, desperately trying to win the header, but he can't get there. I've seen some people trying to attribute some of the blame to him. It's madness. He's back there defending. He's doing his bit. The cross is over the top of his head. What's he supposed to do? But then it comes to Watkins, and Watkins, to be fair to him, takes the goal really, really well, because it would have been really easy sort of leaning back in the position that he was to sky that over the bar. He just about manages to keep it underneath the crossbar, and Villa have their equaliser. And at that point, some people maybe in the stadium felt that Arsenal could go down the other end and get another goal. And, Arsenal had done this before over recent years, where they had to dig deep into the reserves to just find something that would see them ultimately achieve the result they wanted. But it wasn't to be. We had a few moments. Rice put a cross into the box. It came to Marino, who had a shot which deflected off of Kai Havertz before going into the back of the net. The stadium erupted, but I said it in my commentary yesterday, just looking at Chris Kavanagh's response. Now, from where I was, I couldn't tell that it come off of Kai Havertz's arm. I could see from his body shape that, there was a chance that it did, but I couldn't possibly tell. But rather than lose my mind and jump up and down and scream, I screamed initially, I have to say that. I looked at Chris Kavanagh, and there was something about Chris Kavanagh's demeanor that told me that there was something that needed to be checked here. And the minute I saw the replay, I knew it was going to be rolled out. Then I had a bit of a wobble, like a lot of people did, where I was like, hold on a minute, did that actually hit his hand? But I think there's an angle where it's really clear and obvious, and it's the angle sort of from behind Mikel Merino, where you can see it sort of comes off of Kai Havertz's forearm here, which obviously takes it away from Martinez and sends it into the back of the net. So look, no complaints from me on that decision. No complaints at all. But I feel like you kind of need to go back to where we started this podcast to kind of wrap this one up, to kind of go full circle on what we saw yesterday. Defensive lapses, unacceptable. There's no question about that. And you simply can't afford to have those in games of that importance against opposition like Aston Villa. Because, I mentioned that Yuri Tielemans hit the post at one stage, and he did. And that's great for them. But in terms of sort of their attacking stats, they only had 8 attempts, only 4 of which were on target. They had 10 less shots than us. We had 66% of the possession. It's hard, isn't it, at the moment? Because I said it the other day as well. Like I'm getting a bit tired of like going into post-match interviews and hearing, that was an excellent performance. And, we did everything right. And this looked good and that looked good. But unfortunately, it just wasn't our day. Like, you do get tired of hearing that. You do get fed up of hearing that. But the more you break these games down and the more you watch them back, the more you can understand why, as a manager, it must be mind-blowing and baffling as to how you're not getting the results that you want from these games. Because in most metrics, we are dominating. In most metrics, we are. Where I would say that we could still do a lot of work in terms of our performances is with the XG. Because I've mentioned how many more shots we had than Villa. I've mentioned how much more of the ball we had than Aston Villa. But our XG yesterday was 1.32. So we outperformed that in scoring 2 goals. Aston Villa's XG was 1.06. Now, obviously, they've outperformed theirs as well because they've scored twice too. But the point I'm trying to make is that if you're so dominant in all of those other metrics, yet your XG versus your opponents is only what? 20.26 better, then something's missing. Something is missing, guys. Something is missing. And it's clear and obvious to me that is in attack first and foremost. We can moan about the defense yesterday, and we will. But overall, generally, when you zoom out and analyze why Arsenal are where they are this season and the problems that we've had this season, it's very difficult, I think, to sort of land on the defense as a big sort of issue and as and have that as your conclusion, which is funny because you think about it yesterday and we had 2 central midfielders playing at fullback and a guy who is a centre back by trade, fair play, but has barely played there in the last couple of seasons. Yet that was a problem yesterday, but overall, and that's been the case a lot, that we've had to play fullbacks at centre midfielders at fullback. That's happened a lot this season. That it's funny that that's still not our biggest issue. Like yesterday it was in isolation, but I'm not massively concerned about our defensive performances. I'm more concerned about the fact that despite dominating in so many ways, our XG is very low, and therefore because our conversion rate isn't great either, we're in a position where we're just not scoring enough goals to win football matches, generally speaking. And it means that we've got very little margin for error at the back. We've had an immaculate defense pretty much for a couple of seasons. And because of that, when we concede 1 goal, it feels like a disaster. But you're going to concede goals in football, particularly in this league, particularly in this division. You've got to have that bit extra going forward. That's the difference maker. That's the key. That's what Liverpool have and Arsenal don't. And yeah, mikel Arteta said that, maybe something's missing. He talked about, the performance overall as being quite pleasing, actually. But I don't really want to keep hearing that when we're coming away from games without the desired results. There's a lot of Mikel Arteta haters online that want to try and claim that his job should be in question. I don't think that's the case right now. There's a lot of people that want to try and overemphasize Unai Emery's individual impact on yesterday's game as well, because a lot of people feel that Unai Emery should have been given a chance and he wasn't, etc., etc. This wasn't some Unai Emery masterclass. This was a bit of a smash and grab, really, from Aston Villa. They capitalized on some poor mistakes and they had the finishers to do that. That's the difference. They had the finishers. We don't have the finishers. And this performance, when you think about how good it was in some ways, but how lacking it was in others, again, re-emphasizes the point. We need to bolster that attack because some of the players that are missing aren't going to be back anytime soon. And some of the others, I think, have just shown themselves maybe not to be clinical enough to step up when those key guys are missing. And so transfers, or a transfer, is a must in this window. There's no excuse, none whatsoever. We have to reinforce. You're not going to see me shying away from that. But as much as I want to sort of go after individuals or question some of Mikel Arteta's decisions, and I think we've done that. We questioned the Partey thing. We've questioned some of the individual performances of players as well. I think ultimately my big takeaway is the squad is on its knees. And you can sit and debate, and we can have a massive debate around why that is. Is it just because of injuries? Is it partly because of bad planning? Is it partly because Mikel Arteta overworked some of these players? Therefore, they've struggled to cope with the workload that's come at this really busy and difficult time of the season. That's another valid argument as well. There are lots of valid arguments. I'm not saying, that we need to say it's all Mikel Arteta's fault. And I'm not saying that we need to say it's not at all Mikel Arteta's fault. He bears some responsibility as the coach, but the club bear responsibility. The players bear some responsibility as well. We've had a rotten season in so many ways, but at the same time, we're not a million miles away from it. And that's the bit that keeps sort of creeping up in the back of my mind. When I want to be super critical, I then go, yeah, but look, we're not that far off. I've talked about all these problems and issues, but we're still not that far off, which could be seen as a positive. I say could, not should. Could, before you lot jump on me in the live chat. I don't know. Big thank you to Amanda McCarthy for your very, very kind donation to the channel. Thank you so much for your support. I really, really do appreciate it. If I could just ask you to leave us a like on the video if you haven't done so already. There are hundreds of you with us on YouTube, and there are hundreds of you with us on X. If you're on YouTube, please do leave us a like and subscribe to the channel. All of that stuff, it really, really, really does help. If you're listening on audio, please do leave us a review as well. Of course, that stuff really helps. And if you're an X, come over to the Chronicles of a Gooner YouTube channel. You can subscribe on your favorite podcast platforms as well. And don't miss a trick on the channel /podcast, whatever you want to call it. Thank you so much to every single one of you. I would stick around and do loads of questions, but it is my little boy's birthday today, so I'm sure you'll excuse me for wanting to go and spend a bit of time with him today, of all days. We will bring you loads more content over the course of the week, and if you've got any questions, put them in the notes on your phone so you don't forget them, and we can address those over the course of the next few days. As I say, there'll be plenty of opportunities to do so, but it is my little boy's birthday, so I'm going to leave it there. I'm going to say goodbye. I'm going to sign out, and I hope you guys have a good Sunday. Just before I do that, quick reminder that this video is brought to you by the good people over at Stocks FC. If you want to play the game, you can. It's the game where you can, of course, buy stocks in your favorite football players. You can, of course, invest in them when their prices are low and hope that they're going to go up. You can invest in them when their stocks are high and trust in their ability to continue performing, and that's going to bring you those weekly dividend payments that Stocks FC stands to give you. I invested in a load of players when their stocks were low. I'm still waiting for them to rise, and hopefully we will get there. But I'm intrigued and fascinated by this game. What I will say is please don't play it if you can't afford it. It's not a get-rich-quick scheme or anything like that. It is a bit of fun. You can invest what you like. You don't have to invest at all if you don't feel it is for you. But I do urge you to check it out. You can claim 5 free loan stocks, which you can earn dividends on for the first month by scanning the QR code bottom right-hand corner of our screen or via clicking the link in the description below. So Stocks FC, check them out. We thank them massively for their support of the Chronicles of a Gooner. Right, I will see you all on the next one. Until then, take care of yourselves, guys. Hopefully we get some transfer news to talk about soon, for God's sake. Disappointing day, disappointing evening at the Emirates Stadium. The squad's on its knees. Sloppy defending's cost us. I don't know how else to summarize. Thank you all so much. I'll see you on the next one. Until then, take care.